Scott Walker has given women the back of his hand. What Republican Tea Party extremists like Scott Walker are doing is they're grabbing us by the hair and pulling us back.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Democratic Party chair, later apologized for those comments about Wisconsin's governor. She's the subject of a very tough piece in Politico, saying the White House and congressional Democrats have lost confidence in her and that she's a liability to the DNC. Now, when you have anecdotes like Wasserman Schultz insisting that her wardrobe at the Democratic convention be paid for, which she denies, that's coming from some insiders. Is this a hit piece?
Yeah, a lot of the anecdotes were cringeworthy. I think this is partly triggered by that comment she made about Scott Walker, which truly was, even with the low bar of political rhetoric, really, really, really nasty. And I think undermined what is supposed to be her strength, which is to appeal to women voters. And in that case in Wisconsin, it turned that situation into something that worked for Scott Walker. And so I think that's where some of this is coming from. It also feels cyclical. It happens every couple of years that people get upset with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and there's a little bit of they've politically painted themselves in a corner where getting rid of a woman as the head of the DNC doesn't help that narrative.
Other things in this piece, Mara, that she rarely talks to President Obama and she's more interested in building her own career. Did this have a whiff of the White House or her critics using Politico?
There are a lot of critics, and they all willingly cooperated. But this is a classic Politico piece to me. I think it was 9 pages long. And yes, it was a hit piece, but it was a well-reported hit piece with lots of cooperation from all the sources who didn't like her. But in a bigger picture, does anybody in the country care about whether the DNC chairman is on the outs? This is a true inside the Beltway story. Now, it's a spectacle to see her, criticized like this over and over again in print, and she probably is on the way out. But I don't think before Politico there would have been a time when we would have seen this kind of piece, this long, this lengthy. She didn't do anything that was super controversial. Yes, some of the comments were over the line, but mostly people don't like her.
James, fair or unfair?
I think that this is the kind of piece with which, post-Watergate, we are all well familiar now. It's the long knives piece, the chief and immediate effect of which is to make it such that the person being reported on across all media outlets thereafter is described as embattled. I would say that I thought it was a pretty fair piece. It was 1,700 words long. If you look at the actual number of quotes in the piece, they are evenly distributed between on-the-record quotes and blind anonymous quotes. The lead quote, in fact, is attributed to an actual person, a big Democratic donor from DWS's home state of Florida. The only real problem I had with the piece was the lead. The actual lead says DWS is in a behind-the-scenes struggle with the White House, congressional Democrats, and Washington insiders who have lost confidence in her as both a unifying leader and reliable party spokesperson at a time when they need her most, period. There is no sourcing there. It should say, critics say, and in fact, it's not until the 3rd and 4th graphs that you have those words, critics say.
I also don't like the leading anecdote is the wardrobe one, which I think draws this line to the Sarah Palin story, specifically is used for women candidates, and she denied it. I would have put something up a little higher than that.
The reason I thought it was basically fair is that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was interviewed for the piece. She had a chance to respond, and there were no disparaging blind quotes like she's an idiot or we want to get rid of her. But on the other hand, the president can get rid of his DNC chair anytime. Doing it through the press felt harsh. Our allies and James Rosen, Mary Catherine Ham, thanks very much for stopping by. One other item before we go to break. New York's WNBC reported the other day that a federal probe had found no evidence so far that Chris Christie knew in advance about the lane closures at the George Washington Bridge. NBC anchor Brian Williams described the story this way.
The headline here, however, the federal charges are now ruled out for Chris Christie in the affair that came to be known as Bridgegate.
Ouch. NBC Nightly News had to run a correction because the federal investigation is still ongoing. By the way, if Christie is vindicated, I wonder if the mainstream media will devote as much attention to that as to the original drumbeat of allegations. Coming up, The View gets a conservative panelist, but is Nicole Wallace any match for Rosie O'Donnell? And up next, the NFL's domestic abuse scandals. Are the media just going overboard?